Everything that happens in our lives creates how we perceive the world and how we experience any situation. Our thoughts create the state of our physiology, our body. And that is proven over and over again. I might feel something in my hands, right? Because my body might have wanted to fight and it didn't get to. So when you can really feel the body and be with the body knows exactly what it needs to do to heal itself.
Lalita, thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and we have actually known each other for a bunch of years, so I have a little bit of a preview of what we're going to chat about. But before we get started, I just want to ask you a question I like to ask all my guests. And that's, if you had to choose one well-being boosting strategy, what would it be and why?
Take a breath. Yep. Any moment of the day, there's so much power in just getting present and taking a breath. And the breath has the power to shift our nervous system, and our nervous system so much controls how we're feeling. So if we're stressed and we take a long, deep inhale and exhale, it's going to relax our nervous system. If we're falling asleep and need a boost and we just take a breath, it's going to boost us. So every moment of every day, that's available.
Well, that's a pretty easy trick, so I like that. Simple to use for everybody. So before we get talking about your work, tell me a little bit about how you got interested in well-being, mental health, or the topics that you cover in your coaching.
Yeah. Well, I've always been interested in spirituality, particularly. And there's kind of two parts of my journey that go in tandem. I have followed a very deep spiritual path, and in that is a lot of meditation and mindfulness practices. And also, I met a mentor when I was 20 years old and did this very deep dance-based rites of passage program that was also rooted in healing trauma. And she turned me on to the idea that trauma is living in the body. And I had experienced some pretty intense traumas as a teenager. And so it really hit home. And I started down that path of really educating myself and doing trainings and learning more about how the mind and the body work together. And then my spiritual path also brought a lot of that, really how to heal at a deep level. From everything that happens in our lives creates how we perceive the world and how we experience any situation. So I could go into a lot more depth, but there's been different facets of really understanding the human mind and body and spirit and all the levels of who we are, and that we have the capacity to be completely free and joyful all the time. And it's about working with this human technology, really, to master it and deal with all the old programs so they're not the ones creating our experience, and create the ones that we want so that we can live in that state of joy every moment of every day. It's really possible.
That's fascinating. I'd really love to learn more about these programs you talk about. So I understand what you're saying, that we have these experiences that create our perspectives. But can you talk a little bit more about, first, how they're created, and then second, how we deprogram ourselves for more joy?
Yes, great question. When we are infants, especially, our brains are like sponges. And it starts really in the womb. That imagine we are growing inside of our mother, and her emotions, her thoughts are literally going into our DNA and creating our physicality. Everything that's happening in that environment is coming into us. And then we're born, and we're designed to just take in the environment and learn how to survive. Our nervous systems are very much based on our primary caregivers' nervous systems. We're dependent on them for survival. We're on one of the only species that we're basically all born premature. Most animals, they come out of the womb and within hours they can walk. Our brains are so big that we come out very premature, and we're completely dependent on our caregivers for years. So everything about us is designed for survival. So we're absorbing everything and learning from our environment how to survive. And those programs just go very deep. So whatever is the matrix within our upbringing about survival, that creates our core beliefs. And when we're children, our brains are developing so fast and creating so many different neural pathways all the time. And as we grow, they get less and less and less. And our brains learn what are the most important things I need to know for survival. Mm-hmm. So it's a survival system. And for example, if our mom yells a lot, right? We're going to either learn that yelling back is the way to survive, or shutting up and going away is the way to survive. It's going to be different in every system. So then we go into our adult relationships and we learn, I'm never going to speak up because it doesn't work. That's what we learned from our mom. But that doesn't necessarily work the best in our adult relationships. But it's such a deep program. And we're going to believe it because it feels so real. But we can't trust our feelings. Like if you go to a movie and you're crying, it's not because the movie's real. It's because we have these neurochemicals, these feelings that get activated. So we really believe our thoughts and our feelings, but they're so much based on these very original programs, and a lot of them that happen before the age of 7. So I see this over and over with my clients is when we get triggered in our adult relationships and we think it's all about the other person and we're so justified, 100% of the time I can trace it back to a dynamic that they experienced as a child without fail. And it doesn't mean that we don't experience hard things as adults, because we do. But the things that affect us emotionally really deeply are always going to go back to an original wound and program where we make a decision as a child. The world is this way and I have to act this way so I don't get hurt or so I don't die. And that sounds dramatic, but that's kind of the brain's interpretation of everything is like, how do I not die? So everything that we observe, we might take on our parents' behaviors, or we might do the opposite as what our parents do. So that's kind of a very basic level of how we create programs. And a lot of these beliefs, we're not conscious that they are beliefs. We really think that they are the way things are. And so it's uncovering those beliefs gives us a lot of access to choose who we want to be and create ourselves. We think that we have choice, but so much of it is just default to what we learned. And there's, like I said at the beginning, anything is possible. We can become anyone. We can create anything in our lives, but not until we choose our programs. And our brains are always transmitting frequency and attracting those same frequencies. This is science, right? Science by now has measured the frequencies that humans emit from the hearts and the brains and how they resonate with each other. So when we choose our thoughts, we get to actually choose what we create in our lives and how we feel.
Well, let's dive into thoughts and beliefs a little more then. So I can imagine people watching this are thinking, what? Like, I don't choose my thoughts, or maybe they think they do. How does one begin to look at their thoughts more honestly to figure out which thoughts and beliefs are coming from these traumas, and how can they start to shift them in ways that help them create this, unlimited possibilities in their life?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And it really doesn't feel like we can choose our thoughts. I mean, I think that's the main thing that causes suffering is that we have this constant thing running in the background. And a lot of our thoughts are based on hard things that have happened or traumatic things that have happened. And they come involuntarily, right? We're not consciously being like, I want to think about that time that I was really hurt by that person.
Mm-hmm.
They just come and we can't stop thinking about it. So we have to go back into those places. And there's kind of the side of deprogramming and then programming something new.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to do both. Because if we only, like, people can go to therapy for 30 years and it doesn't do anything because they're just talking about the past, certain kinds of therapy, and actually reinforcing the old pathways and not healing anything. So there's different methods to actually release what's there. Now we can get in the habit of just revisiting it, and that's a mental pattern. But when it's really held in place by a strong emotional charge, it's very difficult to just put a new thought on top of it and reprogram the mind. So there's kind of the top down and bottom up, we say, where top down is really where you're using your cognitive processes to reprogram and deprogram. And then there's the bottom up where you're working with what's stored in the body. So I want to just talk about trauma, how trauma lives in the body for a moment, to understand more how we actually unroot something and dissolve the charge that keeps pulling us back. Because the body responds to something, the brain pulls something out of the past, and there's what's happening in the body and the charge, and then there's the memories that go along with it. So imagine that we are a deer grazing in a field where I'm here in Colorado. We have lots of deer, and it's just having its lunch. And then suddenly it senses something, maybe a predator. Everything gets tense. And then suddenly the mountain lion jumps out from behind the tree and starts running after the deer. Every single thing inside of that deer's body is mobilized for survival, right? It's a complete flee response. So it's running, 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 running. And if it gets away, it's going to discharge all of that energy and just go back to grazing like nothing happened. And there's some really interesting videos. Like there's one video of a polar bear. You can find it on YouTube, where they shoot the polar bear. They kind of, it's unconscious. They numbed it or something. They didn't, I can't remember exactly. And when it starts to wake up, you can see it trembling, and it's just like shaking, 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 shaking. And it takes a deep breath. So there's that discharge of all the survival energy that is in the body, right? The sympathetic nervous system is activated for fight or flight. The amygdala is firing, the adrenaline and cortisol, everything is about survival, and it's a very high stress, but it's very temporary. So that allows us to escape a threat, right? And if that doesn't work, then we'll go into freeze. And then there are states of very deep freeze where we go into complete shutdown. And that's designed because if a cat finds an animal that's so in such a deep freeze that it can't even tell it's breathing, it's not going to eat it because it thinks it's dead. So it's a very kind of animal system survival. What happens with humans is we have this wonderful prefrontal cortex that overanalyzes everything. And we get into a survival situation. I should say a perceived survival situation, right? It could be mom yelling, and our brain is like, oh my God, I'm going to die because my primary caregiver doesn't love me or whatever, right? Because we're dependent on that. And all that survival energy is mobilized, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And if we aren't met with that love and care and able to discharge all that energy, it actually gets frozen in the body, and our body doesn't realize that that moment has passed. So my body could still think it's 1990 and that thing happened. And so when we work with trauma through the body, we meet the sensation. We have to really feel it. And wounds and trauma happen when there's so much feeling, there's such a high emotion. That is the glue that goes so deeply into the subconscious mind. And we have to actually go into the feeling to be able to heal it, not the story. The story is actually kind of irrelevant. And
so that's really interesting, and I think difficult for people to separate the story from the
absolutely.
emotion. Do you have tips for how someone can, or when you say emotion, you mean like the sensation, right?
There's sensation and then there's emotion.
Okay.
So we work with both, right? If we want to allow the body to release, we have to be able to feel the sensation. So if I tune into something, a really intense event that happened, I'm going to notice that my chest is getting tight. I feel something in my stomach. I might feel something in my hands, right? Because my body might have wanted to fight and it didn't get to. Or I might feel something really intense in my legs because the legs needed to run, but they couldn't. So there's certain sensations. That's one very good way to not get caught in the story, because when we just go into the mind, we can't heal anything. We have to go subcortical, meaning we have to go beyond the intellect into the body and the feelings and the subconscious. So the body is one axis where we can feel the sensations. We can be with it. Now, sometimes a lot of trauma happens when the body is violated. So it can be too much and we have to go slow, a little bit at a time. But when we can really experience it and allow it to sequence through the body, then it gets released. Or when we can really be with the emotion, which again, we can feel the emotion in the body and allow that to release. And there's a lot of techniques, like there's EFT where we're tapping and it's easy to feel the body, right? We're tapping on specific meridian points and they've been shown to be correlated with different emotions because it's stored in the body again. And we can release what's there without going deep into the story of it. And it's important that we become aware of where we get caught in the story, because there might be a narrative that we're caught in that has a really deep emotional charge. And if we can visit the narrative enough to access the charge and then be with that, and there's many more techniques and many different methodologies to deal with it. But the key is that none of them are about telling the story without some kind of intervening process where we get out of the story and actually, like the inner child work. That's another way where we can be with this part of us that was so hurt, dialogue with it, release the emotion, move the emotion, and then recreate the memory in a way. Like if I'm working with my inner child. So say something for me that was, you could say, wounded or programmed as a child is, I don't feel heard. That might be you could even call it a core belief. It's like, and it shows up in my adult relationships. And it's when I don't feel heard, that's when I get triggered. And so I can just be like so mad at the person, whether it's a coworker or a friend or whatever it is. And I'm like, they're so blah, blah, blah. If I just go to my like 7-year-old child that didn't feel heard and be like, I got you.
I hear you.
I hear you. And you're not going to feel heard by other people. And that's okay. Then that part of me relaxes and I stop getting caught in the current situation, because we can't ever expect other people in our lives to do that for us. It's our job to heal our inner child.
Yeah. And so in a way, triggers can also be a tool. Be like, oh, like I'm feeling triggered. That means something is activated in me. And like, yes, maybe this person is being a jerk, but that's kind of irrelevant because it's something about the way we're perceiving their behavior. Like another person might not find them to be a jerk.
Yeah.
So is there a way to, I guess, first identify these triggers, and then is it just going into your body and feeling the emotion, or talking to the inner child, or is there a good
Yeah.
way to move beyond these triggers?
Yeah. Great question. So, how do we identify triggers? If we have an emotional charge about something, I would call it a trigger, right? The same thing, me and you, we could be in the same situation with another person, and I am just furious about it. And you're like, what's the big deal? Yeah. So they were being a jerk. So whether they were being a jerk or not, let's say that they genuinely were, and we could both objectively be like, that was really inappropriate. You would be like, but I'm not going to take it personally and whatever. I'm going to go on with my day. And I could be fuming. That's because it hit a chord, right? They don't install the buttons, they just push them. Usually our parents are the ones that help install those buttons. So if you feel an emotional charge about something, it is always about us. And we can always and should always deal with the charge within us. And then we can come to the situation. And sometimes we do have to address. It's not like ignore every time someone treats you inappropriately at all. It's, I have to deal with why I'm so upset by this and heal myself. And then I can come to the situation. And as an adult, where my prefrontal cortex is in charge instead of the limbic brain, the emotional brain, and communicate responsibly in a way that actually resolves it. So, how do we do the inner work of healing? That was the second part of your question. One tool is the inner child work. So, okay, how old do I feel? I feel like I'm 4 years old. I feel like I'm 16 years old. You'll be able to tell. Every time I ask someone this question, they know. Or maybe they feel like they're every age. That's okay. Pick one. And you can go back in time. Now, it's really important that sometimes when we do this kind of work, we really need another person with us, especially if there's a lot of trauma, because we can get lost and not actually do the healing work. Trauma happens in isolation. It happens when we don't have a compassionate other. And sometimes we need that other person to really have something resolve inside of us, because we're mammals, because we're organized for a relationship. And that's why some therapeutic relationships or friendships or partners, we can really have so much healing happen in those relationships. So it's important to watch. Do I start to get dissociated or lost in the story or lost in the trauma, or is something moving inside of me? And if we get lost there, then find someone else to go there with you. And a lot of times we can do it ourselves. So go there. How old do I feel? Be with the feeling. You can imagine going back in time and just, what did that part of you need at that time? They probably needed a
Yeah.
hug. They might have needed to get out of that situation. So you can, whatever they need, imagine that. The imagination is so powerful. Our thoughts create the state of our physiology, our body. And that is proven over and over again. And memory is subjective, right? Our brains interpret something and then it lives as a memory. We can recreate our experience of that event through creating new images. So maybe I go into that house where mom and dad were fighting and I take that little girl out of there. I give her a big hug and then we go have ice cream. That is going to rewire something in the brain. Or I just imagine holding her on my lap and I'm like, I'm here with you. I've got you. Whatever it is, we're meeting whatever we didn't get at that time, we're giving that to ourselves. And the feelings and the thoughts create that shift in the body and in the brain and in the emotions. So that's one of many techniques. And we could be here for hours and hours if I were to share all the different techniques. And, it's really good to have toolbox of different techniques because different things work at different times. Different things work better for different people. And it's just, there's a lot of tools available for the healing work. And once there's an emotional shift, then we'll think about that person and that situation, and it'll just feel neutral. But they still might be a jerk, but we don't have feelings about it anymore.
Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. I know earlier you mentioned that some of our experiences, our programming, come from pre-birth, from our mother, and other ones come from pre-memory in our early childhood. If we're doing inner child work and talking to a wounded part of ourselves that is beyond this life or in early life, how do we access that without the memories associated with it?
Good question. And I'll just add, I work a lot with sexual abuse, early childhood sexual abuse, and very frequently all the memories are suppressed until adulthood. And a lot of people don't have memories of their childhood because there's a lot of trauma, and that's the psyche's way of protecting us. And we start to remember when we have the capacity to resolve that. So everything lives in the body. And sometimes it's even easier to work things out when we can move through the body memory and not have all the images and memories, because we can get easily caught in the story. So we do not need memories to work with what's here because it's right here. It's in the cells of the body. So if we go in and we experience a sensation and we can be with it and allow it to move through the body. One of the methods I'm trained in is somatic experiencing. It's very much about allowing the body to sequence out what got frozen. So there's ways of seeing how does the body want to move? Or I also do a lot of dance-based work. So when you can really feel the body and be with the body knows exactly what it needs to do to heal itself. And then there's also working with what I'll call energy. Everything is vibrating at a different frequency, and this is measured, right? Very simply, look at water. We can see ice is very third dimensional, and then there's vapor, and everything in our bodies is vibrating at a different frequency. And so if we can move the energy and actually feel, we take things on from our parents and everyone we're in relationship with, and we give away parts of ourselves. So a lot of it is whatever our mother was, for example, feeling when we were in her womb. Maybe she was scared and stressed. That fear and stress is in us as an energy. So, for example, say this, it's white, I need a different color. All right. This is my therapy frog. He's very heavy. He weighs 8 pounds. Okay, so this is my mom's stress. And when I was in her womb, she had stress. What mother doesn't have stress and want the best for her child? Okay, so this goes into my DNA. This goes into my brain. This goes into my whole field. And as I grow up, there continues to be this dynamic where my mom has stress. And I'm just living it with it inside of me. And partly I take it on because I want to protect my mom or whatever dynamics are happening. There's a very powerful technique that I use with all my clients and it's very simple. If I'm going to tap into what I have that belongs to my mother, I can just feel it. And I can feel the stress in my body. So I let myself really feel it. I feel it in my body. I feel it in the emotions. I take that stress and I say, Mom, I give you back your stress. Whew, that's so much lighter. And I can then take back my freedom or take back my joy, whatever I gave in place of her stress. And this is a very powerful healing technique. And when you give back everything that belonged to your parents, this particularly comes from my spiritual master, Her Holiness Shree Maa, and we do a program called the Journey in Profound Healing. And it's a very powerful uprooting of all of the things that we took on from our parents that got formed the moment of gestation and growing in the womb and growing up with our parents. So it's like, imagine you have this plus 50 other things that are all just kind of on you. You take all of them out of you, and then it's like you get to experience yourself for the first time. You without your parents in you, and then take back all of the parts of you. And anytime we experience a trauma, there's part of us that can get fragmented and left in the past. So it's like we're bringing all the parts of us back, and we don't even know they were gone until they're back, and we feel so much more of ourselves. So that's another technique, and it's working with energy. Doesn't need any story. There's the working with the body. There's all of the ways of going into the brain and the body. There's hypnotherapy where we can program new things, anything that gets us into a deeper brainwave state where the subconscious mind is really available for accessing information and also imprinting new information. That's what's going to heal at the deeper level instead of just repeating the same story.
And what are some of the benefits that you see in your clients or in yourself as a result of using these techniques?
So many benefits. It's,
Yay!
I mean, there's kind of the big parts of our past that we can stay stuck in and that create a lot of suffering. Those get neutralized. So it's no longer, my parents did this to me as a child, right? We spend a lot of energy suffering over those things. And at a point, it's like we can let our parents be our parents, and we have no emotional charge about anything that happened in the past. And then there's all the worries that we create about the future, or the moment to moment patterns in our lives where we create stress, we create whatever it is. We all have different favorite thought patterns and behavior patterns. And all of those we can shift. There's a lot of people struggle with bad habits or addictive behaviors. And when we're no longer trying to shift out of whatever uncomfortable space we're in by self-medicating, and we can just feel amazing any time of any day. I mean, that's ultimately what it is just feeling great. And part of that comes with, we have to deal with the original wounds and the programs and the beliefs and all of that. And that creates our state. And then there's also the practices that we need to do every day to keep our state high, right? We need to eat well. The food that we eat has such a huge impact on not just how we feel physically, but how we feel mentally and emotionally, because they're not separate. Or how we move our body, or how our relationships are. So then there's the inner world, and everything about the inner world we can feel better. And mostly it's not like we permanently feel better. That happens in enlightenment. That's when you're in a spiritual path that's very much spoken about, is the ultimate freedom where we never suffer. Where we are, things are going to come up. And we're going to have all different kinds of emotional, mental experiences, but we know how to move through them. That's the biggest thing, is we never get stuck in a lower experience. We're always like, okay, here's what I'm feeling. Let me work with this so that I can feel better. Or we learn how to work with our mind in a way that it's not running the show. And that requires training. So I've been talking a lot about the healing work. We also just have to train our mind. It's like you get a new puppy. If you don't train it where to go to the bathroom or to stop barking, it's going to be a crazy dog when it's 1 year old. Like it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be eating everything. The neighbors are going to be mad. We have to train the mind, because the mind, like we spoke about, is trained by our environment. And now it's so much trained by social media where the dopamine system is completely dysregulated and we're constantly seeking immediate gratification and all over the place. I mean, everyone could be diagnosed with ADD because of the way that we're training our minds every day to just context switch constantly. So when we have something like a meditation practice where we're consciously allowing the thoughts we don't want to move past and then choosing the thoughts that we want to have. And the importance of a practice is that it's like if I want to learn an instrument, I have to sit down and practice. I can also visualize how I am playing the instrument. And so we have to have time where we're not doing anything else, where we're consciously deciding what our thoughts are. And then that translates to the rest of our day when we're in action, is we remember, here's the thoughts. Or we go into our day with a certain state that we can maintain. And then when it gets dysregulated or chaotic, it's much easier to come back where our nervous systems are regulated. We know how to relax our nervous system. We know how to come back to the thoughts that we've already put into our mind, because the mind thinks the same thoughts most of the time. So we have to consciously actually create new ones. And the more often we think them, we default to those. Mm-hmm. So I'm going in a million directions, but there's different parts of it. And all of that in the end creates our state. And what our thoughts and emotions are then create our life. So there's the benefit of not just how we feel, but then we can have more money. We can have a more fulfilling career. We can have whatever it is you want in your life is going to come from the inside out and not the other way around. So all the benefits, I've seen all the benefits.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to comment there on, it's not necessarily like law of attraction. It's just if you're perceiving your world in a particular way, then that is your world, right? So like, I think people they forget about the science behind this. There actually is like self-fulfilling prophecies are a thing that's really well studied. And that is, if you believe, something is going to happen, it's actually more likely to. But that's because of our perceptions, and then our actions follow our perceptions. So it's not like woo-woo at all. It's actually very measurable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say it's both. It's our perceptions and it's the power of, like I spoke about, those measurable, you can measure the electromagnetic field.
But still measurable.
It's measurable.
Yeah.
And if you have a larger electromagnetic field because of how you're cultivating your state, that they've measured how it vibrates with other people. So you're going to attract, my brain is communicating with your brain through measurable frequency. And so if I'm communicating life is horrible and bad things are going to happen to me, then everyone else's brain is going to respond to that.
Yeah, you feel that when someone else is thinking that way.
We feel it. Also, my nervous system and your nervous system are co-regulating. They're sensing each other, and the more dominant nervous system is going to help regulate or dysregulate the other nervous system. So when I'm with somebody and I'm totally regulated, like my sympathetic and parasympathetic are very balanced and I'm relaxed and I feel good, you're going to be able to relax into that. If I'm like this, you're not going to be able to relax into that. You're going to be like, get me away from this person.
For sure. That makes complete sense. So you mentioned some of the challenges like social media and just thoughts being crazy. Are there other key challenges that you've observed in your clients, like sticking points where people tend to get stuck a lot?
Yeah. I work with different demographics. So I work a lot with young adults and teenagers. And I would say the biggest issue I see is social media and overuse of technology, where their brains are just being totally miswired. and they will spend 6 hours on TikTok in a day and then be like zombies. They self-report, right? And I don't go there and they're saying, you have to change this, this, and this. I'm like, how do you want to feel? And what choices do you want to make? So with that, they can't get their schoolwork done. They wake up super late and feel groggy. They get depressed because all the chemicals in the brain are dysregulated. They're not getting outside. They're not getting exercise. So it's just a chain reaction. And then they're eating crap. So it's like, of course you feel depressed. Like I would too. Anyone would feel depressed if we were doing that to the brain. So we have the mental health epidemic. I have never seen anything like this before, and it gets worse every year. The amount of mental health struggles among young people. It's very sad. And so much of it can be changed with lifestyle shifts. And then they just come back to their nature. Our nature is to be healthy. That's just period. And so it doesn't take a lot to shift whatever is necessary to come back to that nature. So, I mean, every kind of mental health struggle with young adults. And then, I mean, I'm seeing it younger and younger. I also work with kids. And then in my adult clients, it's most often triggers in relationships, which we spoke about already, right? Everyone struggles in relationships, and it's all about what really needs to be healed in me so that instead of my wounded child showing up in this relationship, my adult can show up and I am the one taking care of the child. So I would say those are some of the biggest themes. And of course, there's a lot of health things, physical health things. And I'm not a doctor. I have a ton of knowledge and background about natural healing methods and using diet and lifestyle to optimize our physicality. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 2 years old. So I've had a lifelong journey of healing my body through natural, mostly lifestyle ways. And I've really learned to keep inflammation down and feel vibrant and healthy in my body. So with that comes, how does the mind affect the body? And I'm just keep talking about this because it's so real. Every thought affects our cells. Every emotion affects our cells. So for me, I've observed if I've had a flare up in my life, I look at, okay, do I have a pathogen infection? Did I eat something? Is it the weather? Yes. And what's going on emotionally that is affecting me physically? The stress affects it, the whatever. And I work with that. And then I have had so many moments where I just close my eyes, I relax, I go into my body, I meet my nervous system and my cells. If there's something that needs to relax, I relax it. I visualize bringing light into my cells because the cells respond to the images we create in our mind. And the flare up stops. Many times I've experienced this. So I have a practice of every day imagining light in my cells. And I've seen this with my clients is headaches, digestive issues, chronic issues, whatever it is. If we work with the underlying mental, emotional, or traumatic cause, the body then starts to shift. And especially often we'll see if someone had a trauma in younger years, that's going to manifest somewhere relevant in the body. So it can take years to develop. But if we work with it at that deeper level, then the physical body is then freed up to heal itself, because that's exactly what it's designed to do. If you get a cut, it heals itself, right? We're not doing that to the body. It's the same thing from the inside out, and the mind is incredibly powerful. So that's just another domain that I've seen really huge results with clients is physical changes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I know for me personally, I had a bunch of stress, like I think it's like 8 years ago now, and I got so sick, like
Hmm.
sick for years. And so I got to witness this firsthand of being like, wow, like I was fine before, and then suddenly I'm really ill. And I had to basically reprogram my stressful thoughts in order to start healing. And that,
Yeah.
is an ongoing process, of course, but so true, super helpful. Now, if people want to learn more about your work, where can they go?
My website, lalitashree.com.
Wonderful. And can you just tell them a little bit more about the services you offer? Because I know you offer a couple of different things.
Yeah. I do one-on-one coaching and also small group coaching. I'm about to create some new things, so they won't, depending on when this comes out, we'll see what I have on my website. I also work with children and teenagers and young adults like I described, and then there's physical in-person retreats that I do from time to time. So it shifts, and whatever is happening in whatever moment, it's going to be on my website. Yeah. So, and I also do nature-based work. I find that nature, we don't need all the fancy tools and techniques when we just be with nature. It does so much of it. So there's in-person work where we can do this kind of work in the natural world where we naturally relax and can just come into a new place. And I love in-person work also because we get community, and we're so hungry for community right now. We're so isolated, and it's important sometimes just to step out of our everyday world to really become something new and get out of the daily habits and the routine, and then we can come back to our life new. And then there's follow-up work so that we address the long-term habits of what keeps all of these things in place in our lives. So when I do in-person, say, retreat intensive work, there's going to be a follow-up so that we can really make the long-term shifts. I've seen so much over time where people have an amazing experience and they get so high and they come back charged, and then they go right back into the old patterns.
Yeah.
So for me, I really believe in having both, that they really complement each other.
Wonderful. Well, this has been fascinating. I'll put the link to your website in the description below the video. And it's been, great chatting with you. And hopefully we'll chat again sometime
Yes,
soon.
thank you. It's been a pleasure.
If you're a coach, consultant, or well-being entrepreneur, grab free science-based content to grow your business by clicking the ebook link in the description below.